On my 30th birthday, I was fired from my job at Descriptive Ltd. My boss, in order to prevent my promotion, fabricated non-existent evidence claiming I had betrayed the company. As I was leaving, he hurled insults at me. "Crispin Langley, you think you can climb over my head? Crushing you is as easy as squashing an ant." 6 months later, my former colleagues and I founded a new company and successfully acquired our old employer. Looking at his shocked expression, I smiled coldly. "Now it's time for the ant to judge you." Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. My name is Crispin Langley, and I'm an ordinary programmer. After graduating from university, I joined the renowned Descriptive Ltd in the industry. I've worked diligently at this company for 8 years, being assigned to various projects. Working overtime and burning the midnight oil became the norm, with dark circles under my eyes as a standard feature. Due to my outstanding work performance, I climbed the ladder from junior programmer to team leader. At 28, I started dating a gentle and lovely girlfriend. We planned to get married when I turned 30. I thought the rest of my life would pass by smoothly like this, but an unexpected turn of events completely changed the trajectory of my life. Descriptive Ltd is a well-established company in the industry, with its main business being software development and talent outsourcing. This means they deploy programmers to work on-site at various client companies. Although they hold an absolute market share, the company's complex internal processes and large management team have seriously affected the pace of business development. To address this, the Human Resources Department spearheaded a new talent development plan 3 years ago. The plan aimed to bring in a batch of excellent professional managers from outside the company, while also launching an internal potential talent cultivation scheme. The head of my department, Mr. Barnaby Cargill, who is also my direct superior, is a middle-aged man in his 40s. He had already been the head of this department when I first joined the company. According to previous colleagues, he was one of the earliest pioneers who started the business with the chairman, working his way up from an administrative assistant to his current position. He doesn't have an IT background and doesn't understand technology, but he's very good at managing upwards. He often takes credit for his subordinates' achievements and insists on being named as the person in charge for every major project. The chairman is a very sentimental person, and the company's hiring philosophy since its establishment has always been avoid layoffs if possible. So for many years, despite his lack of achievements in the department, as long as he didn't make any major mistakes, he could stay until retirement. However, this unwritten rule has been adjusted in recent years due to the impact of the broader economic environment. While introducing talent and promoting internal staff, the Human Resources Department is also implementing a staff streamlining plan, in other words, layoffs. After last year's Spring Festival, people from various departments of the company started leaving successively. Colleagues were privately discussing whether they would be next. The first person to come and ask me about this was Alaric Latham, a veteran employee with 10 years of service in our department. "Crispin, aren't you on good terms with Rowena Sinclair from HR? Why don't you secretly ask her about the layoff list for our department?" I interrupted him. "Brother Alaric, the list is confidential. No matter how close we are, she can't tell me." Seeing that he couldn't get any information from me, Alaric muttered to himself, "I can't be fired. I have elderly parents and young children to support, and so much mortgage to pay every month. Besides, at my age, it's not easy to find a new job in this employment environment." I didn't respond to Alaric further. My mind was preoccupied with the meeting Rowena had called me to this afternoon. "Crispin, the content of our conversation today involves personnel adjustments and needs to be kept strictly confidential until it's officially announced. Do you understand?" I nodded, and she looked at me with a slight smile. "Congratulations, Crispin, you're getting a promotion. Rowena Sinclair is my girlfriend, but no one at the company knows about this. We've always kept a low profile at work, but once when we were having dinner at a restaurant after work, we happened to run into Alaric Latham. However, we greeted him casually and explained that the dinner was to thank her for her previous help with work. Alaric is a straightforward person without much guile, so he didn't think much of it. But after that incident, Rowena kept asking me about our future plans. Crispin, what do you think? If we get married, according to company policy, one of us would have to leave Descriptive Ltd. Why don't I start looking for opportunities elsewhere now? Rowena blinked her eyes as she looked at me. I laughed. Silly girl, if anyone's leaving, it should be me. You're doing so well here, all stable and secure. I've been with the company for 8 years now. If I don't get promoted next year, I'll switch to another company. Failing that, I could also start my own business. You know about that project I've been working on after hours? Rowena interrupted me. Isn't the company doing some personnel restructuring recently? You could wait a bit longer. There might still be a chance. Crispin? Crispin Langley. I'm talking to you. Are you even listening? My thoughts were interrupted by Alaric's voice. I nodded, indicating that I had heard him. Well, remember what I said. He finished before returning to his seat, while I resumed my work. A while later, I received a message from Rowena on my phone. Crispin, your birthday is the day after tomorrow. I've booked a fantastic restaurant. I smiled and replied with a simple okay, then took out the diamond ring I had prepared earlier from my bag, feeling incredibly excited about the day after tomorrow. On the morning of my birthday, I had just arrived at the office when Barnaby Cargill called me into his room. Crispin Langley, take a good look at this, will you? He tossed a stack of documents at me. I picked them up and saw they were all materials related to a client's core system from one of my projects. Last night, I received an anonymous internal report claiming you were involved in stealing confidential client data. The evidence is conclusive, and you've been sacked by the company. I stared at him in shock. Mr. Cargill, there must be some mistake. What evidence is there that I stole anything? Barnaby Cargill looked at me and said, Crispin, does it really matter whether you stole it or not? What do you mean, Mr. Cargill? He laughed loudly, unconsciously puffing out his belly. Crispin Langley, did you really think you could climb over my head? I've been with the chairman for years. I can see right through your little schemes. Did you think you'd get that promotion just because HR arranged it? Let me tell you, crushing you is as easy as squashing an ant. Barnaby Cargill told me to go pack my things and leave, calling in company security to watch me as I cleared my desk. He announced loudly in the office, Crispin Langley has been dismissed for seriously violating company policies. My colleagues turned to look at me in surprise, and Alaric Latham even stood up, wanting to come over and say something. I gave him a warning glance, and he sat back down, shocked, while I continued packing my things. Barnaby Cargill raised his voice again, addressing the security guards. Keep a close eye on him, all of you. This man has sticky fingers and likes to steal things. Then he walked over to me and said in a voice only we could hear, Crispin Langley, look at the state of you now. You're nothing but rubbish. That evening, I went to the restaurant Rowena had booked in advance as planned. Crispin, I'm so sorry. I had no idea about this. If I'd been notified earlier, I would have told you for sure, she said, looking like she was about to cry. I patted her head gently. It's all right, it's not your fault. Even if you had known, you have your professional ethics and wouldn't have been able to tell me anyway. So what's next? Have you thought about where you'll go? Rowena asked with concern. I haven't decided yet, but I'm curious how he got hold of those files. I've always been careful. Those core system files were only on my computer, which I always carry with me wherever I go. Crispin, stop thinking about it. It's your birthday today. Let's eat first. Rowena interrupted, putting some prawns, my favorite, into my bowl. I looked at all the dishes on the table, my hand unconsciously reaching for the ring box in my bag. I had planned to propose to Rowena today, but now with this situation, as I was pondering, Alaric called. Mate, I've been made redundant. Alaric asked me out for a drink. After dropping Rowena home, I went to meet him. When I arrived, he was already drunk and crying. Seeing me, he grabbed my arm and started sobbing. HR said my performance has been poor these past few years, so they let me go. But even if my performance ranking was low, that's because Mr. Cargill always gave me low scores, just to put his cronies in the department at the top. I knew a bit about Alaric's situation. At the start of the year, when discussing work plans for the department, Mr. Cargill had given him several key projects, saying he wanted to develop Alaric's skills. But in reality, the projects were quite challenging, so Alaric had been working extremely hard. By the time he'd overcome the initial hurdles and the projects were about 80% complete, Mr. Cargill reassigned him to trivial new projects and handed over all his previous important work to his favorites, under the guise of giving new people opportunities to develop. After this happened a few times, Alaric became discouraged and his work attitude deteriorated, starting to just go through the motions. They say I'm slacking off, but there are so many people in the department who slack off. Just look at Cargill, what does he do? He just drinks coffee all day and often disappears in the afternoons. What are the company's criteria for redundancies anyway? Why me? Alaric cried and rambled on before finally passing out on the table. I unlocked his phone with his fingerprint and called his wife, briefly explaining the situation. When his wife came to pick him up, I noticed her prominent belly. I wanted to say something, but in the end said nothing and just helped her get him into the car. On my way home, I thought about what Alaric had said and felt uneasy, thinking about everything I'd done for the company, my own situation, and Barnaby Cargill's despicable expression that afternoon. I suddenly felt I had to do something. I called Rowena. Can you help me with something? I need the list and contact details of recently dismissed employees. What do you need those for? I can't give you their contact details directly. That's okay, just the names will do. Crispin, people who leave are automatically removed from the Ding Talk group at midnight the next day. Why don't you check the records yourself to see who's left recently? All right. I didn't want to put her in a difficult position. I checked the time. It was 10:07 p.m., less than 2 hours before I'd be removed from the group. Crispin, I'm sorry I couldn't help. Rowena's voice was full of apology. It's okay, I understand. Just focus on your work. Don't worry about me. After hanging up, I started checking the list of recently removed members. Fortunately, I had added many as contacts previously due to work. I quickly set up a small group and added them all. Crispin, what's the plan? Do you have any ideas? Someone asked. Lads, I know we've all been made redundant recently. I'll get straight to the point. I have a plan. I briefly explained my plan to everyone and renamed the group Operation Ant. At midnight exactly, I was removed from the company group. I sighed softly, never imagining my 30th birthday would be so memorable. Little did I know then that Rowena, the girlfriend I had planned to propose to, was with someone else at that very moment. Barnaby Crispin asked me for the list of recent redundancies today. I didn't give it to him, but I'm worried he might do something, Rowena said, nestled in Barnaby Cargill's arms, looking slightly anxious. Darling, what are you afraid of? He's been such a pushover all these years. I don't think he can do anything dramatic. The wheels of fate had begun to turn. At that moment, they had no idea that 6 months later, my companions and I would return to make them pay the price they deserved. The next day, Alaric Latham called me again after sobering up. Mate, are you serious about this? Starting a business is already a risky venture, and with the current economic climate being so poor, you'd be better off finding a stable job at another company. With your background, even if you can't become a manager right away, you could definitely land a team leader position. Alaric, I've thought it through. It's not just a spur-of-the-moment decision. I've been planning to start my own business for over a year now, and I've been doing research and development in my spare time. Barnaby Cargill just gave me the final push. I paused briefly. Everyone else in the group is willing to join me in this venture. You're the only one who hasn't responded yet. What do you think? Alaric was silent for a moment, then said, Let's do it. I can't swallow this insult either. My new company develops AI apps. I plan to use AI to assist with basic human resources, administrative, and simple programming tasks. This would free up some entry-level positions and reduce companies' labor costs. But that wasn't my original plan. You're right, this project was specifically modified to target Descriptive Ltd. Once companies start using AI tools more widely, Descriptive Ltd, whose core business is human labor output, will inevitably take a hit. I quickly completed the initial preparations like company registration and office rental, while continuing R&D and looking for investors and clients. Alaric was in charge of external relations, mainly helping me negotiate with clients, while I focused on core R&D work. For the first 2 months, I basically lived at the office to get the app launched as quickly as possible. During this time, Rowena Sinclair asked me about the company a few times, but I was too busy to explain. I thought I'd surprise her once we successfully secured funding. Fortunately, the hard work paid off. The app development progressed more smoothly than I expected, and we completed an internal test version. Once we get some test data from companies and secure funding, we'll be able to develop and launch it successfully. Alaric was also bringing good news frequently. After speaking with him on the phone, many companies expressed interest in our product and willingness to further discuss potential cooperation. This greatly boosted the team's confidence. Mate, don't forget we have a meeting with Information Technology Limited tomorrow morning to introduce our product, Alaric said, sitting across from my desk. Have you prepared all the materials? I've had them ready for ages. You don't need to worry about that, I said, pulling out a USB drive with the files from my drawer and waving it slightly. Everything's set. I'll sleep at the office tonight. He smiled. All right, I'll pop by your place later to bring you a suit. Dress formally tomorrow. We'll have a celebration dinner in the evening. Information Technology Limited, the company Alaric mentioned, is an industry leader and the first to formally invite us for a meeting. This is a crucial opportunity for us, so I decided to handle the negotiations personally. If we can successfully secure this deal, the company will have at least several £1 million in profit annually. While it's still a far cry from our goal of acquiring Descriptive Ltd, it's definitely a big step forward. Perhaps due to the recent late nights and overwork, I fell asleep on the sofa without realizing it. The alarm woke me up the next morning. Alaric wasn't in the office, but a coordinated suit was laid out on the sofa, along with my USB drive. I left for Information Technology Limited directly from the office. Upon arrival, I was quickly shown to a waiting room by the receptionist. Soon, a young woman entered. Good morning, Mr. Langley. I'm Winifred Godfrey, Mr. Godfrey's assistant. I'll take you to the conference room now. As I followed her, 2 familiar faces unexpectedly emerged from the conference room. Barnaby Cargill? What are you doing here? I stared at him and his assistant Wilfred Lambert in surprise. While Descriptive Ltd and Information Technology Limited weren't exactly competitors, they didn't have any business dealings either. His presence here was unusual. Well, if it isn't Crispin Langley, what a coincidence. Running into you here of all places. The moment I saw Barnaby Cargill, I had a bad feeling in my heart, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. Well, Crispin Langley, he said as he moved closer to me, lowering his voice. It's been a while, but I see you haven't changed a bit. Still as naive as ever. With that, he laughed loudly and left with Wilfred Lambert. Do you know each other? Winifred Godfrey asked me. I nodded but didn't say anything more. There were 6 people seated in the conference room. After briefly greeting Mr. Godfrey, I began the product presentation. Our app can interface with your company's existing systems. In addition to our proprietary features, we can also develop custom functionalities to meet your specific needs. I had just finished the company introduction and product overview and was about to move to the next slide when Mr. Godfrey suddenly interrupted me. Just a moment, please. Mr. Godfrey glanced at me. Mr. Langley, I have a question. Is this app developed in-house by your company? Of course. My team and I developed it ourselves. I spent a year planning and 3 months developing. Before I could finish, a middle-aged man sitting closest to me cut me off. Mr. Langley, I never expected someone so young to be a repeat offender. What do you mean by that? I asked, confused by his sudden accusation. He sneered. What do I mean? Your former boss, Mr. Cargill, just introduced their company's newly developed product to us. He mentioned in passing that they recently fired an employee for stealing client data and wondered if anything else had been stolen. It turns out he was talking about you. What are you saying? I haven't stolen anything. I raised my voice involuntarily, but the next second, he threw a printed copy of a PowerPoint presentation at me, saying in an extremely sarcastic tone, "Why don't you take a look yourself, Mr. Langley, and see if you've stolen anything or not?" I looked at the document. The cover read, Descriptive Ltd AI New Product Description, with Barnaby Cargill's name on it. I couldn't help but widen my eyes in disbelief. When I opened the document, I was even more shocked. Apart from the company name, company introduction, and font colors, the core product content description was identical to our company's product introduction. This is impossible. This absolutely cannot be. I couldn't understand it. Although the app was developed by the team, the core data and today's presentation materials were my personal responsibility for over a year. It couldn't have leaked, let alone fallen into Barnaby Cargill's hands. Mr. Langley, Mr. Godfrey's deep voice interrupted my thoughts. I think we'll end here for today. Winifred, please show Mr. Langley out. As I left the technology group building, I was still in a daze, unable to comprehend how things had suddenly taken such a turn. Just then, a colleague from the company called. "Mr. Langley, how did it go?" I didn't know how to respond. The collaboration our team had been anticipating for so long. I just gave a soft in reply. My colleague might have misunderstood, thinking we'd sealed the deal. He continued, "That's fantastic. Trust Mr. Langley to clinch it. Oh, by the way, there's something I need to report. Alaric didn't come to the office today, and none of us have been able to reach him. We're supposed to have a celebration dinner later. Alaric Latham hadn't gone to the office? Then when did he deliver the suit to me?" I tried to recall the events from last night's blackout to when I woke up this morning. Then I remembered the USB drive next to the suit, but I was sure I had put it in the drawer. At that moment, something in my mind seemed to snap. My emotions were in turmoil. I kept thinking it couldn't be possible, but I couldn't calm down. "Mr. Langley? Are you all right?" Suppressing my emotions, I replied, "I'm fine. I'll give him a call. You all go ahead for dinner and wait for my update." After hanging up, I called Alaric. He didn't answer. I went to his house to look for him, but he wasn't there. His wife opened the door. "Mrs. Latham, is Alaric not home?" "Oh, Crispin. Alaric said he was going to the celebration dinner with you all. Aren't you supposed to be together?" Looking at his pregnant wife, I was afraid to say anything that might upset her. So I made up an excuse about coming from somewhere else and wanting to pick him up on the way. "Mrs. Latham, I'll be going then. Take care of yourself." After leaving Alaric's house, my mood grew even heavier. I called my colleagues at the company and briefly explained that Alaric was ill and that we hadn't closed the deal today. But considering everyone's hard work recently, I suggested they go ahead with the dinner as a team-building event, with the company covering the expenses. I made an excuse about having other matters to attend to, so I wouldn't be joining them. My colleagues were quite naive and didn't ask any further questions. Back home, I collapsed on the sofa and started to piece together what might have happened. At this point, even though I didn't want to admit it, I knew that Alaric had most likely stolen the USB drive while I was asleep, given it to Barnaby Cargill, and then returned it as if nothing had happened, causing me to lose a major client the next day without knowing why. But I couldn't understand why he would do this. What puzzled me even more was that since the last incident when Barnaby Cargill slandered me, I had become extra cautious. I had password-protected the files on the USB drive and hadn't told Alaric about it. Even if he had taken the USB drive, how did he know the password? Just then, I received a call from Rowena. "Crispin, it's been a while since I've seen you. I miss you. Can I come over to your place tonight?" "I'm at home now," I said, feeling utterly dejected. "Could you come and keep me company?" Rowena arrived quickly. "What happened? Are you all right?" she asked, gently hugging me. I briefly told her about what had happened today and my suspicions. She looked shocked, How could it be Alaric? I can't understand it either. Why would he do this? He knows what kind of person Barnaby is. And there's one more thing I can't figure out, I said, looking at Rowena. How did he guess that the password was the date we started dating? Rowena froze for a moment, then covered her mouth. Crispin, you actually used that as the password. She paused. Is it possible you let it slip? Or maybe he just kept guessing randomly and happened to get it right. That's impossible. How could he guess a 6-digit password in just 3 tries? How do you know he only tried 3 times? Rowena looked at me, puzzled. Because I added a program. To prevent core data leakage, if the wrong password is entered 3 times, the system would automatically transfer the data to my cloud drive and delete the local files. I would get a notification immediately. I didn't receive any notification, which means he entered the correct password within 3 attempts. I see. Rowena fell into deep thought. So what do you plan to do now? I guess Alaric will avoid seeing me for a while, so I can only investigate from Barnaby's side, since he can't run away. But you don't have any evidence, Rowena said, resting her head gently on my shoulder. Crispin, why don't we just let it go? Consider it bad luck and find another company to work with. I don't want to keep having bad luck. I need to get to the bottom of this. Seeing my determination, Rowena didn't say anything more. The next day, I went to the office as usual. Just as I was about to tell everyone that Alaric would be taking some time off due to health reasons, I received Alaric's resignation letter forwarded by HR. At the time, because of trust, we didn't have any additional termination clauses in his contract, nor did we have him sign a non-compete or confidentiality agreement. His resignation at this time increased my suspicions about him, but deep down I still didn't want to believe it. A colleague I had known for 8 years, a comrade who had fought side by side with me for months, my good friend, how could he betray me overnight for our common enemy? I adjusted my mood and reassigned his work to others. I also informed the team that I would be developing a new project soon, while the rest of the company should continue with the daily development and operation of the app. After arranging all this work, I went to Descriptive Ltd. What I didn't expect was to see the person I wanted to see most at that moment in Barnaby's office. Crispin, what are you doing here? Alaric avoided my gaze and turned to look at Barnaby. Mr. Cargill, if there's nothing else, I'll get back to work. Don't go, Alaric. It's rare for Crispin to come back and see you. Aren't you 2 good mates? Why leave as soon as you meet? I felt terrible inside. Ignoring Barnaby, I kept looking at Alaric. Alaric, can you tell me what's really going on? Alaric still couldn't look me in the eye. Barnaby's grin grew more insolent. Oh, Crispin, Crispin, you really dared to dream, didn't you? Thought you could bring down our company and me with just an app? How does it feel to be betrayed by your own best mate? Feels good, doesn't it? Truth be told, I didn't need Barnaby to tell me. The moment I saw Alaric, I had already accepted the reality I'd been refusing to face. I just didn't understand. Tell me why. I pressed Alaric. Alaric slowly raised his head, his eyes glistening. Crispin, I'm truly sorry. I'm not like you. You're on your own with no attachments, only yourself to worry about. My wife's about to give birth. I need a stable income. Following you in a startup, living hand to mouth. I'm not young anymore. Why help him? Have you forgotten how Barnaby treated you before? Mr. Cargill, he offered me very good terms. He even went to the company to specially request bringing me back through a talent recruitment program. My position and benefits have all been upgraded. He's assigned me 3 people and given me several key projects to lead personally. Crispin, I really had no choice. I'm sorry. Alaric's voice grew softer and softer until he finally lowered his head. After hearing Alaric out, I felt a mix of emotions. Although his actions were illegal and unethical, I had no concrete evidence in hand. Moreover, the terms Barnaby offered were indeed tempting, and Alaric's choice was understandable. If it were me, I might have made the same decision. I had only come to get the truth from Barnaby. Now, faced with this situation, I didn't know how to react. After a few minutes of silence, I walked dejectedly towards the office door. At the doorway, I turned back to look at Alaric. One more thing I want to ask you. How did you guess the password? What password? Alaric's confused expression didn't seem fake. But before I could clarify, the security guards Barnaby had called escorted me out of the building. Could he not know about the password? Standing in the wind, I felt that things might not be entirely as I had assumed. My phone pinged. It was a message from Alaric. Mate, I've really let you down on this one. I hope you can forgive me for the sake of my wife and child. I really need this job. And about that password you mentioned, I genuinely don't know anything about it. Thinking back to when I asked about the password, Alaric's expression didn't seem like he was lying. But besides him, there was only that new graduate who had just joined the company as an assistant, Wilfred, or it could only be Barnaby. But that was even more impossible. How could Barnaby possibly know about the date Rowena and I started dating? Suddenly, something exploded in my mind. An inexplicable panic rose in my chest. Just then, an unknown number called me. Hello, who is this? Mr. Langley? This is Winifred from Technology Group. Do you remember me? I do. You're Mr. Godfrey's assistant. What can I do for you? There are some things I'd like to discuss with you in person. When would be convenient for you? I checked the time. In an hour. Choose a place near your office and let me know. After hanging up, I let out a soft sigh. What needs to be faced will have to be faced sooner or later. I arranged to meet Winifred Godfrey at a cafe near her office. Did Mr. Godfrey send you to find me? Is it about that incident last time? I couldn't think of any other reason she would want to see me. No, I wanted to meet you on my own. Mr. Godfrey doesn't know yet. I wanted to talk to you first before reporting to him, Winifred said, sitting across from me with a sincere expression. Please, Miss Godfrey, what did you want to discuss? Mr. Langley, the real plagiarist is actually Mr. Cargill, isn't it? I was shocked to hear her say this, my heart feeling as if it had been struck. For 2 whole days, my girlfriend and my former best mate had been telling me to let it go, to give up. I never imagined the truth would come from someone I'd only met once. At this moment, I was as stunned as when I had seen Alaric earlier. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Why do you say that? Because during the presentation, Mr. Cargill said he was in charge of the project. He told everyone how he had spent years on it, going on about how hard he'd worked. Winifred paused and glanced at me. But when it came to the core product details in the PowerPoint, he didn't say a word. It was all explained by his assistant. Is that all? I was surprised by this young woman's perceptiveness and intelligence. You suspect him just because of that? Winifred shook her head slightly. Not just that. I also noticed his assistant had very dark circles under his eyes, clearly the result of long-term overwork. When I was seeing them out, his assistant even yawned, looking extremely tired. But Mr. Cargill looked full of energy. Especially after greeting you in the hallway, he looked so smug. It didn't seem like someone who often stays up late doing research and development. Winifred looked me in the eye and continued slowly. On the contrary, you came alone, without any assistance, and presented everything yourself. And you had already encountered him before entering the meeting room. If you had really plagiarized his work, you couldn't have remained so composed. Also, your expression when told the materials were the same didn't look fake. It seemed like a genuine reaction. Finally, the decisive evidence is, she paused, lightly tapping the area under her eyes and smiling. The dark circles that come free with long nights of work don't lie, you know? I looked into her beautiful eyes and suddenly felt the weight that had been pressing on my heart for 2 days shatter. Miss Godfrey, you must have watched a lot of detective shows as a child, eh? That's right. I've seen over 1,000 episodes and am familiar with over 800 murder methods. If you need any hee. She grinned mischievously and imitated a famous detective's catchphrase. There is only one truth. Her adorable gesture made me laugh out loud, but I still shook my head slightly and asked, why do you believe me? We've only met once. I could be putting on an act. Maybe I really did plagiarize, or perhaps I was out partying all night, because, Winifred interrupted me, saying seriously, "The most important things can't be seen with the eyes. They must be felt with the heart. You're well read, aren't you? Even quoting The Little Prince." We both laughed, and suddenly I felt my world starting to brighten. Actually, Mr. Godfrey had his doubts too. Mr. Cargill doesn't have a great reputation, so in the end, he didn't collaborate with him. So, strictly speaking, you haven't lost. You still have a chance, Winifred said, taking a sip of her coffee. "So what do you plan to do next?" "I want revenge," I said, imitating the tone of a dramatic teenager. "I want everyone who's hurt me to pay the price they deserve." She laughed at my joke, blinking her big, beautiful eyes as she looked at me. "Is there anything this brilliant detective can do to help?" "Why do you want to help me?" I asked, pretending to be serious. She put on a solemn face and said, "Because justice may be delayed, but it will never be denied." Winifred and I discussed the matter and agreed that our breakthrough should come through Wilfred. He should know how the PowerPoint presentation came about. "I'll try to ask him," she suggested. Winifred advised me not to return to Descriptive Ltd just yet. "I can try to arrange another meeting with Mr. Godfrey for you, giving you a chance to clarify things in person. Mere clarification isn't enough. I need to show my sincerity," I replied. So we split up. I returned to the office to continue developing the app, adding some new features. Meanwhile, Winifred went to seek information from Wilfred. To my surprise, she soon returned with Wilfred in tow. "Mr. Langley, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was your company's product." Wilfred apologized immediately. I hadn't expected him to apologize right away. "It's all right, Wilfred. This isn't your fault. Can you tell me what you know about this?" "Mr. Cargill gave me the USB drive the night before. He knew I had a good memory and asked me to familiarize myself with all the functions of the test app on the drive. Then I had to modify both the app and the presentation to make them appear as our company's version, even changing the development timeline to an earlier date. I stayed up all night to get it done." "What about the password? How did you know it?" I pressed. "Mr. Cargill told me the password. When we found the USB drive was password protected, he made a phone call. Then he gave me 3 sets of numbers. The third attempt unlocked it. Mr. Cargill told me to copy everything. Then he took the USB drive back. My heart was racing, and I had a feeling of impending revelation. Suppressing all the physical discomfort I felt at that moment, I used every ounce of strength to keep myself calm. I looked at Wilfred. "Do you remember those 3 sets of numbers?" Wilfred nodded. "Yes, sir. They were." After he finished speaking, my composure completely shattered. The first set of numbers was my birthday. The second was Rowena's birthday. And the third was the anniversary of when we started dating. In this world, apart from me, only one other person knew all 3 sets of numbers. My stomach churned violently, as if everything inside was about to come up. "Crispin, are you all right?" Winifred asked with concern, noticing my distressed expression. "I'm fine," I replied, suppressing the nausea I felt inside. I turned to Wilfred. "Will, can you help me?" "Of course, Crispin. I'll do whatever I can to help. You've always had my back at the company, defending me when Mr. Cargill bullied me and teaching me so much." Wilfred looked at me sincerely. "It's just, I don't want to lose my job. Would you be willing to come work at my company with me instead?" Wilfred raised his head, his clear eyes showing almost no hesitation as he nodded instantly. Our group of underdogs had gained a new member. Though Wilfred had only graduated recently, he was full of ideas and talent. He quickly integrated with the team. Previously, he not only did his own work but also took on some of Barnaby Cargill's secretarial duties. Perhaps out of guilt towards me, he voluntarily took on many of the company's administrative tasks, like organizing everyone's receipts. One afternoon after work, he came to my office. "Crispin, I suddenly thought of something that might be useful to you." He sat across from me and handed me a notebook with some restaurant addresses written in it. "What's this?" I asked, puzzled. "These are the restaurants Mr. Cargill frequently visits, based on the receipts I helped him expense." He always claims it's for client entertainment. But Crispin, he doesn't really have many clients to entertain. Does he? My eyes lit up. Go on. And these, I noted them down because they seemed odd. These are office supplies he purchased under the department's name, all with top-tier computer configurations. But the ones we actually use don't match up. But the company has expense standards, and all assets need to be checked and inventoried. Crispin, you may have been at the company for a while, but there's a lot that someone at my level might know better than you. What do you mean? Each department head actually has some special approval rights. Many expenses that go through special approval don't have standards. As for inventory, yes, things are logged, but from what I know at Descriptive Ltd, they only do a full asset count every few years. He paused, then continued, I suspect the chairman has already noticed. After all, financial reports don't lie, and there are audits. I've also quietly asked some of my mates in finance, and Mr. Cargill's expense claims have decreased in recent years compared to before. I guess the chairman must have given him some private warnings, but out of courtesy didn't make it explicit. Instead, he's trying to balance the books gradually through layoffs. Wilfred didn't continue, but I understood everything he was implying. That finance friend you mentioned, can you still contact them? She was laid off too. Actually, if it weren't for you, I probably would have been laid off soon as well. Get in touch with her and ask if she'd be interested in coming for an interview at our company tomorrow. Barnaby Cargill was truly rotten to the core, and Descriptive Ltd was about to be hollowed out by these parasites. And we, the hardest working people at the bottom, living like ants, were about to launch our full-scale counterattack. Rowena Sinclair and I maintained a lukewarm relationship during this period. To prevent her from becoming suspicious, I told her I had booked a fancy restaurant. The company's been doing well lately, and I've been too busy to give you attention. I've prepared a surprise for you. She sounded thrilled on the phone, as I had chosen the anniversary of our relationship for this date. She probably thinks I'm going to propose to her that day. Winifred Godfrey helped me secure an appointment with Mr. Godfrey. I went to his office with the revised materials and sincere intentions. After more than 2 hours, Mr. Godfrey finally accepted my cooperation proposal. I'll explain this situation to the department heads from the last meeting. He paused. Winnie wasn't wrong. You are indeed a very capable person. I'm looking forward to your product launch. I returned to the company with good news, and my colleagues were overjoyed. Everyone knew what this cooperation meant for us, and the good news didn't stop there. Mr. Godfrey, through his connections, also introduced us to some other major corporate clients. With Mr. Godfrey and Information Technology Limited's endorsement, once the funding was in place, our app was quickly officially launched. I think the news will soon reach Barnaby Cargill. Let him enjoy his last few days of happiness. Through Donald Godfrey's connections, I contacted the senior partner auditing Descriptive Ltd and briefly explained the situation to him. Soon after, they formed a special team to investigate Descriptive's accounts and processes over the past few years. As a result, Descriptive experienced a major internal upheaval not long after, which had a significant impact on their stock price. Barnaby Cargill, along with other department heads, received various internal disciplinary actions as a consequence. Meanwhile, our company launched a second AI app targeting individual end users. Its core function was to help people improve work efficiency, freeing them from routine and repetitive tasks to engage in more creative and innovative work. The app was widely acclaimed by the market upon its release. It quickly rose to the top of the free app charts. We also received investment offers from multiple venture capital firms as a result. Remarkably, we managed to go public in just 6 months, becoming a legend in the industry. At the same time, we officially initiated our plan to acquire Descriptive Ltd. My teammates and I were on the verge of success. When we returned to Descriptive Ltd, I brought all the company's employees with me. We had all been laid off from here. This time, there were no security guards to stop us, nor was there any shouting from Barnaby Cargill. Instead, we were greeted by his shocked expression. "What are you all doing here together? Are you going to beat me up?" He unconsciously backed into a corner. Barnaby Cargill, Do you remember who we all are? We lined up in front of him, each stating our former department, position, and name. We were all the insects you once looked down upon. At the bottom, doing the most basic repetitive work every day. No hope, no future in sight, ready to be discarded by the company at any moment. I glanced at Barnaby Cargill, who had retreated to the corner, his body trembling slightly. I smiled coldly. But even the most insignificant insects have their own value. Now, it's time for the insects to judge you. Wilfred Lambert stepped forward and said, I'm going to report you for stealing company trade secrets. Get ready for prison. You have no evidence. Barnaby Cargill shouted hoarsely. I have evidence. Alaric Latham stood outside the door, glancing at me from afar. I have evidence. I recorded everything you said to me that day when you asked me to steal Crispin Langley's USB drive. Alaric Latham, you ungrateful dog. You're burning bridges. If I go down, you won't have a good ending either. If you report me, you'll go to prison too. When you get out at your age with a criminal record, what kind of job do you think you'll be able to find? Alaric, I interrupted Barnaby Cargill's mad shouting. Thank you. I'll wait for you to come back. Alaric Latham's eyes instantly turned red. Barnaby Cargill's eyes also turned red. He finally collapsed on the ground, saying with a sob, But I still don't understand. Why did Mr. Godfrey believe you? I had already done so much. I looked at his twisted, greasy expression and his belly that could barely fit into his suit, now like a lump of ruined clay. I smiled coldly. Because justice may be late, but it never fails to arrive. Rowena Sinclair's makeup was impeccable today, and she was dressed elegantly as she sat across from me, gazing at me with affection. 6 months ago, I would have thought she was the person who cared about me most in the world. I would have devoted my life to loving and protecting her, giving her happiness and joy. But at this moment, when she placed her hand on mine and gently caressed it like she used to, I immediately pulled away. What's wrong? She asked. I have something I want to tell you, I replied. I'm ready. Go ahead, Rowena said, her eyes twinkling. She was probably imagining a scenario where she'd become the wife of a CEO of a listed company. Do you know what day it is today? Silly, how could I forget? It's the anniversary of when we started dating. That's right. Today is our anniversary. I paused for a moment. So I've prepared a surprise for you. Rowena tried hard to control her expression, to not appear too excited. She deliberately made her voice sound innocent. What kind of surprise? Close your eyes. I guided her step by step to the floor-to-ceiling curtain. You can open them now. When she saw the roses scattered on the floor, she couldn't help but cover her mouth. Darling, are you going to? Let's watch a video together. Rowena probably thought that the screen would show sweet moments from our past. Then our friends and family would emerge from behind the screen, offering flowers and blessings. Isn't that how proposals usually go? I forced myself to imagine her little scenario, to experience her feelings, until I was awakened by her sharp cry. Crispin Langley, have you gone mad? The screen was playing explicit scenes of her and Barnaby Cargill, with her coquettish voice echoing throughout. I think you're the one who's gone mad, Rowena. Rowena hadn't expected this. After her initial outburst, she frantically searched for the switch to turn off the projection. When she couldn't find it, she came and knelt in front of me, clinging to my legs. Crispin, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. My voice was devoid of any warmth, my tone icy as I uttered just one word. Why? Rowena, seeing my resolute attitude, wiped her tears and began to explain her reasons, one by one. I made a major mistake at work earlier. I was about to be fired, but Mr. Cargill pleaded for me, and that's why I was able to stay. You were so busy during that time. He was caring and attentive to me. At first, I kept refusing, but later, Crispin, you only cared about work. You never cared about me. He promised that as long as he was there, he could ensure my promotion and keep me in the company. You never thought about what I really needed. I listened to everything she said with a heart of stone, then silently turned to leave. Crispin, why can you forgive Alaric Latham but not me? Can't you give me one chance? Rowena shouted at my back. I stopped in my tracks. When you were with Barnaby Cargill, when you were laughing and planning how to suppress me and trample me underfoot, did you give me a chance? I didn't look back. A few days later, I heard from others that Rowena had resigned from the company. In the break room of Descriptive Ltd, gossip about her started to circulate. I heard her say she quit to travel and get married with her boyfriend from a listed company. Wow, I'm so envious of her. Wait, didn't I hear that she had some unclear relationship with that Mr. Cargill? Really? I want to hear more about this. She had finally achieved her old dream. One day, I'll become the talk of the company, even in the break room. Hey, what are you thinking about? Winifred waved her hand frantically in front of my eyes. You're not thinking about your ex-girlfriend, are you? What are you on about, Miss Godfrey? I pretended to be annoyed, gently taking hold of her hand. So, when did you start to know? She asked me. Know what? That she cheated. Hey! Winifred feigned anger. Mention your ex in front of your current, and you'll have a new ex. All right, I'm just teasing. I smiled at her. You want to know when I started to realize you're Mr. Godfrey's daughter, right? Yes, I'm sure I never mentioned it. And no one in the company would have said anything. She fell into deep thought. Well then, Detective Winnie, care to guess how I found out? I couldn't help but smile again at her serious contemplation. I can't figure it out, she pouted, starting to act coy. Just tell me, please. It was that day when I was presenting the proposal to your father. I asked him directly. Winifred's eyes widened. But why did you even suspect? Because. I opened her palm and took out the rose I had prepared in advance on the table. Inside was the custom engagement ring I had specially ordered, which I gently placed in her hand. The most important things can't be seen with the eyes. They must be felt with the heart. So, Miss Winifred Godfrey, are you ready to be my one and only rose?